you've got to give yourself a good talking to, and you've got to really address the thoughts that are going on inside your head, because you need to have a strong mindset and you need to believe that you can do it. The only thing standing between you and what you want is what you think about yourself.
You're listening to the She Renovates podcast. You're listening to She Renovates, the podcast for women who want to renovate to create an income and a life they love.
Hello, everyone. Obviously, it's Bernadette back again today. Now, today what I'm going to do is answer a question that I was asked recently. I was at a conference and I had a chat with a lady, and these were her words. And I thought that it would be valuable to do this as a podcast episode, because I know this is an issue for many women and I think I've cracked it. And so the question was, I'm over 60, got a successful business, but still renting a home to live in, retirement's on the horizon, and what can I do? Now, I really love this question because I think this is something that needs to get talked about. It needs to be talked about because it is a huge issue. Now, I often quote the stats that in Australia, we have just shy of 500,000 women over 50 who are at risk of homelessness. And I know that that is a very, valid number because I meet these women every single day. And the thing is, what is very deceiving is they don't look like they're at risk of homelessness. They look after themselves. They're well-dressed and, look really confident because they have a decent income. But the problem is that not having enough super ahead of you is one thing, but it's quite another thing to be facing having to pay rent or a mortgage in retirement when you don't have enough super. If you're just on, the pension or whatever, that is a life of poverty. It's just a few dollars more than the Australian poverty line. And so I really want to have a big impact on this, and you can do it. I'm saying you to anyone that's watching this and is in this position. Housing security is critical, particularly for women, because women, the stats around violence against women are horrible, and we need to know that we've got somewhere safe with a roof over our heads that we can afford to live in into our old age. And I talked about our niece, how I had this conversation with her about the fact that she could be buying a property to live in rather than renting. And just recently I got this really lovely message from her saying, I never imagined that I could do this. And it actually was quite easy, which is interesting. So I want to give you 10 steps to actually addressing this problem. And so that lady that I spoke to, I hope you see this or hear this episode at some stage, because I know that it will change your life. Now, the first thing is you've got to give yourself a good talking to, and you've got to really address the thoughts that are going on inside your head, because you need to have a strong mindset and you need to believe that you can do it. The only thing standing between you and what you want is what you think about yourself. So, I often say in our community, if you're feeling shaky, in terms of your resolve, go on a solid diet of personal development. Like, find some mentors, and I'm not saying go and pay a mentor, I'm saying find some online mentors who really inspire you to be the best version of yourself and use their content to help you to build a really strong mindset. So that's the first thing. You want to really know that you can do this. And then when you're ready to get started, then you follow these next steps. Now, in order to get started, you do need some money, but not as much as you think. So there are a lot of government incentives around to help people get into a home, particularly single mums. So if you're a single mum, and schemes for buying a property with a 5% deposit without having to pay lender's mortgage insurance, which is usually a killer. So that is the first thing I would do, is look at what's available, and with the view to buying a property with a 5% deposit. Now, if you are, say, looking at a $500,000 property, and I'll talk about where you buy the property in a minute, but if you're looking at buying a $500,000 property, we're talking about $25,000. Now, I don't care how you get that money, but you need to get it. You can beg, borrow, and steal to get that money, but you need to get some money to get started. So, if you're a woman that has parents that have assets, I am sure most parents would be willing to lend you some of their equity to get started. Now, you're not asking for a handout. So I think a lot of young people worry that they are asking for a handout. It's not the case. It's really just borrowing some equity so that you can get into that property. The next thing is to look at how you can increase your income by, say, 10 or 20,000. I'm thinking I will run a little training program on how you can make, say, 20,000 a year extra without changing anything, so that you are able to, save more and have more capacity. So I had a conversation with a lady yesterday who was really had a house and a mortgage, but was really struggling to pay the mortgage. And I was able to show her a way that she could increase her income by $30,000 tax-free per year. So that is an enormous boost to get started. So watch out for that, because I'm going to be running that shortly. So in terms of buying a property, so I'm going to share the climb the property ladder strategy. Now, what you buy initially is what you can afford, not what you want, not where you want to live, what you can afford. Now, there is some discomfort in this, because obviously you may have to compromise the things that you want for a little while. But if you compare what we're doing now to living on the pension on like $400 a week and having to pay rent out of it, it's pretty good motivation. So I really want, if you haven't got a home, or if you've got a mortgage that is going to really prevent you from living the life you want, really try and get on board with this. You buy a property that you can afford. Now, I know I live in Sydney. It's one of the most expensive cities in the world. And I know that you can buy a 2-bedroom apartment in Sydney for $500,000, okay? In a reasonable suburb, a good suburb. It's not going to be in Double Bay. You're going to have to get the train to work. But you can buy something for around $500,000. So I've based my sort of model on a $500,000 property. So let's say you do manage to get the 5% deposit, and you buy a $500,000 property. That's a $25,000 deposit. And the main thing about it is that it meets the principal place of residence status. Now, this next thing is you want to work very closely with your accountant, because it's great that when you're renovating a property, that your own property, and if you add value and sell it, that increased value is tax-free. But you walk a fine line between it being capital gains tax exempt and not. And I would strongly recommend that you work with your accountant to make sure that you stay on the right line. And by work with the accountant, what I would say is just talk to your accountant before you buy the property, tell them what you're planning to do, and get them to help you navigate that so you do stay on the right side of the law. Now, Australian tax law is self-assessed. So the risk is if you get audited and you're not on the right side of the law, it's a problem. So that's your risk management strategy. So you buy the property, whether you live in it or not is incidental. You just meet the requirements for it being a principal place of residence. And then the next thing is that you improve its value. Now, I can show you an example of a property, a 2-bedroom apartment that I renovated in Sydney, where a 5% renovation spend and made 100,000 in profit. So I made a 20, and that was after selling it and paying all the sales costs and so on. So the next thing to do is to get the 5 to 7% money property value together to improve the value of the property. Now, you want to make sure that you buy the right property. So get that money together to be able to improve the value of the property. And to improve the value of the property, you do a strategic renovation to extract the maximum profit. Now, people think that's just cheap. It's not just cheap, it's strategic. And it's in the things that you choose to do and how you do them to actually make that property worth way more than it is right now when you buy it. And if you follow our Instagram, I shared the Reno Value Pyramid, which talks about that creating a strategic renovation, how you do that. So once you do that, you should be able to sell that property and make a clear, say, 20% profit, okay? If you're very strategic every step of the way, that goes from choosing the right property, doing the right renovation, managing it really expertly, making sure that you get champagne for a Prosecco budget, then styling the property for sale, selecting the right agent and the right campaign to sell it, and extracting the maximum resale price. And I should also mention timing your sale, okay? If you do that, then you and clear a 20% profit. So 20% on 500,000. And if you're able to do it with a 5% deposit, you're talking about 25,000 deposit and 100,000 profit. Then the next step is to rinse and repeat. So if you have increased your income by 10 to 20,000 using some of the strategies I'm going to teach you in the next couple of weeks, and then making 100,000 each time, by the time you do that 5 times on a $500,000 property, and you've got your home paid for, and you've got your dream home paid for because you've renovated it as well. Now, if you're in a regional area, you've got a lot more options because prices are lower and prices are lower. Now, let's say you've got a bigger income and you can afford a more expensive property. Let's say you can buy $1 million property. 20% of $1 million is 200,000. So you can get there sort of quicker. But let's start with baby steps. And then the idea is to rinse and repeat. Okay. And of course, sometimes you can't manage a part of the equation. That's when you start thinking about joint ventures. Sometimes you can speed up your journey because you can buy a house with a little bit of land. So I guess what I want you to know is that it absolutely is possible and it doesn't need to take forever. If we didn't have to worry about staying on the right side of the tax law, then we could probably do them much quicker. Like 5 renos, you could do that in 2 years. But you do need to manage the legality of that and make sure that the ATO doesn't come to get you. And so staying on the right side of the law is the best way to go. So if you are watching this, I'd love to hear what you think. If you're not and you're watching the replay, once again, let me know it's a replay and let me know what you think is a strategy. But I think that there is a way to get your home paid for. Once you've got that done, let's say you've done the 5 times and you've got your home freehold, then the next thing would be to set up a financial structure to then use that equity to start doing projects to build wealth. And you might think, oh, I'm over 60, it's not worth it. To be honest with you, you've probably got another 30 years. So absolutely, it's worth it. You're just getting started. So I hope this has been helpful. Thanks for watching. And yeah, see you next week.
This is the She Renovates podcast. To discover how to harness the power of renovating, check out theschoolofrenovating.com.